Hi, this is Jamey from Stonemaier Games. I am here today to talk about my favorite game mechanism in my favorite light game that I played recently for the first time at Geekway to the West in St. Louis. And this game is called Camel Up. Some people call it Camel Cup, some people call it Camel Up. I'm going to call it Camel Up. Camel Up is a racing game where there are 5 camels that are racing around a track, and on your turn, you choose one of 4 things. You either choose to slightly influence one camel's movement, you choose to take a die, or a randomly chosen die, and it rolls by itself. There's this kind of this pyramid thing that you use to select and roll the die, and one of the camels corresponding with that die will move. 3, you can bet on who you think will either be in first place or last place at the end of the game. And 4, you can bet on who's going to win each leg of the race. The game is played in a number of legs. The legs depend on how long the game lasts. But a leg is basically after all 5 camels have moved, the leg ends, and you score based on which camel's in first. And you maybe lose some points if your camel that you bet on is in last place. So very simple actions. And one of the highlight features of this game, before I get to my favorite game mechanism, is that the camels can stack on one another and then move accordingly. So, for example, I don't have this game. I'd show you if I did. Here, I'll use M&Ms. So if I have the brown camel and it's ahead of the yellow camel, and the yellow camel ends up moving 2 spaces, 1, 2. It will stack on top of the brown camel, and then later, if the brown camel moves, say 3 spaces, the yellow camel moves with it, and the camel on top is in the lead. So this can lead to camels coming from way behind in the race, or camels that look like they're ahead. They can catch up and stack on top of another camel. It also gives you an element of predictability in that you know that the yellow die has already been rolled, so you know the yellow camel isn't going to move again. So you're able to look at the other camels that can move and which camels are on top of them, or if the camel that can move is on top already, but the camel on the bottom can't move. You can use these things to estimate who will move into the lead. It's still kind of a crapshoot. You don't really know how far the camel is going to move. But my favorite game mechanism in this game, and it ties into all those things I just mentioned. That's why I explained them. My favorite element is that you are not a camel. Each player, from I believe it's 1 to 8 players, you might even be able to play this game solo. Maybe it's 2 to 8, but it goes up to 8. The players are not camels. They are individual people who are betting on the camels. And I think this frees up a lot of interesting design space within the game, because the designers were able to pick a specific number of camels and make the game work with that number of camels, because they're not tied to the number of players at all. There are always 5 camels, 5 different colors, and those camels are always going to move around in the exact same way. A leg will end when all camels have moved the exact same way, regardless of the number of players. So with that constant in place, the designers were able to evolve a lot of the other mechanisms around the number of players. It scales really well because of that. And I love this. It's inherent, it's built into the game, but I think it's so clever that the players are people who are just betting on the camels. The other racing games don't do this. In many racing games, you are the camel, or you're the car racing around the track, or whatever the animal is, or creature, or Zeppelin. I think there's a Zeppelin game coming out that has Zeppelins racing around the track. You're just a person who's betting on the camels. And that makes the game a lot of fun. It's really engaging for all players. It feels a little bit, if you've ever been to a casino and played craps, it's a little bit like that, because in craps, you are not the dice. You are a person betting on the dice, and other people might be betting on the same dice. And so you're not working together with other players, but you might be rooting for the same thing as other players, or groaning as your camel, the same camel that another player bet on, does poorly. There's this camaraderie that forms from players being separated from the camels themselves. So I really love this design mechanism. In fact, I'm curious. I'm not familiar with a lot of like actual racing games. Euphoria is technically it was not technically a racing game, but it is. It ends up being a racing game. But games where you are racing something around a track. Are there any other racing games that use this mechanism where players are separate individuals that are betting on whatever is going around the track? The only close comparison I can think to is another game I haven't played, but I've read a lot about it, called Spartacus. Spartacus is a game where you're fighting, gladiators are fighting against one another, and players who aren't directly involved in each battle might have money tied up in the gladiators that are fighting, and they might be betting on certain gladiators to win the battle. So they're still engaged at all times, even though they're not controlling one of the gladiators. So anyway, really cool mechanism. I really enjoy it, and I just had a blast with the game. I was really surprised by how much fun I had, and I immediately ordered it. It hasn't arrived yet, but I look forward to playing it when it does. Let me know what you think about other racing games that use this mechanism where you're separated from the things that are racing. Thanks.